What do you say to those who believe Pennsylvania is fool's gold for Republicans? That you've got two Democrats in the Senate from Pennsylvania, you got a Democratic governor, that it's been, Trump won it in 2016, but prior to that, it had been, I don't know how many years. I think it was H.W. Bush was the last Republican to win it prior to Trump in 2016. It just feels like it's always just, they run, they believe, and then Lucy in the football.
Little out of reach. Well, I think structurally, you have to pay attention to what's happened. So when President Trump won in 2016, there were 1 million more registered Democrats than Republicans. Today, as of 2 days ago, it's 298,000. So 700,000 movement in registration. That's because the cities are losing Democrats who are moving out of state. We're registering rural voters who didn't vote in the past. And many Democrats are becoming Republicans. So structurally, the state is much more Republican. And then we've invested a lot, and there's been an enormous effort. The Trump campaign and my campaign have been very coordinated on mail-in ballots. So when you look at the numbers, Megyn, on mail-in ballots, there's been an enormous shift. The Democrats will probably still win mail-in ballots, but it's going to be 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 less than they have in the past. So those two factors alone would, I think, create a very different macro environment. But then on top of that, just the level of discontent. I think Biden, Pennsylvania may have been the one state where President Biden would have been a better candidate than Kamala Harris. But, Scranton Joe, he'd been campaigning there for 50 years, knew every union leader, every county commissioner. This Kamala Harris agenda, in her own words, you've heard her say it, ban fracking, legalize illegal immigration, confiscation, mandatory buybacks of guns. These positions may work in San Francisco. They are completely out of touch with a Pennsylvania that's moving to the right. And I think those are the factors that just sort of make this structurally better than it's been in the past. And then, I'm running against a guy who hasn't done much. He's got the name, but he hasn't delivered, and he's become increasingly liberal. And so he's not been tested. He's not been challenged. And I think
very few, if any, of his bills have ever become laws. I don't exactly know what he's been doing other than voting with Joe Biden 98% of the time. I do want to say, you don't have to take Dave McCormick's word for it or Megyn Kelly's or Cook Political Report. Listen to Chuck Todd. Oh, I know my audience doesn't, but listen to Chuck Todd talking about this race on October 11th. It's SOT 43.
What do you think about Pennsylvania, Bob Casey?
This is the race that I think is, when I look at which one of these swing state Senate races can defy the presidential, right? We have seen there's only been, since the rise of Trump, only Susan Collins has been able to break this mold where she could win her Senate seat while the other party won the presidential in her state. She did that in 2020. There is so much money for McCormick. Casey is being outspent. And there's something missing for Casey this time. You can sometimes feel when a candidate.
So you think that Harris could win Pennsylvania, but Casey could lose?
I think the Senate race has been slightly separated in that state a bit from the presidential. I think of all the ones, I think Michigan and Wisconsin can no more than 1 or 2 points from the presidential. Pennsylvania is the only one I think differently of.
Pretty interesting. Although I will say your opponent spent just about as much. I mean, this race is hugely expensive. He's thrown a lot of money at it too.
He spent more. That actually, Chuck had that wrong. I think this summer I was outspent something like 5 to 1. I had $50-60 million of attack ads that came against me, and during that period, the polling closed. And I think listen, it's hard to know what's going on in voters' minds, but I think what's happened, the negativity. I mean, this is a guy who's been in office for 18 years.
You're saying that the polling deluge against you helped you?
I think so. And I attribute it to two things. One, this is a guy who has been in office for 18 years. His entire campaign is about attacking me. So he's not running on what he's accomplished. He's running on attacks. And then second, the ads I have done, I've put my face on the camera, and I've talked about my service in the 82nd Airborne Division, deploying to Iraq. I've talked about being a wrestler in high school and college, and in Pennsylvania, wrestling is a religion. It's in the bloodstream. And I've got my, 7 generations in Pennsylvania. So I've got a family farm. So the lies and the lies have been proven to be lies by independent sources. The Washington Post had a big article last week, which is typically not a conservative leaning publication, that ad that Casey ran saying that I was going to cut Social Security and Medicare was a complete fabrication. And that's been
WAPO
the whole
gave it
approach.
4 Pinocchios.
Exactly. So I think people are like, wait a second, this dark, ominous music, it's just, and I get up there and say, listen, these are lies. Let me tell you about the kind of leadership we need for Pennsylvania's future. Bob Casey's had his shot. He just hasn't delivered. I think people see the genuineness of that.
Well, I
argument.
was looking for the goods on you. Of course, I would give you a hard time. So far as I can tell, anything that's holding you back would be abortion, which is a difficult one for a lot of Republicans in swing states. And they're saying that you're a carpetbagger because you've got a presence in Connecticut, where I am, in addition to your home in Pittsburgh, and they want to paint you as like an outsider, kind of like a Dr. Oz type. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but on both of those, listen, abortion is polarizing across the country. I'm someone who thinks it shouldn't be decided by judges. I think the people should decide, and I think it's a states' rights issue. And the people in Pennsylvania have decided that we have a law that allows abortions up until 24 weeks. And the Republicans and Democrats have voted for it. And the guy who signed it into law was a guy named Casey, Senator Casey's father. Wow. And so and you have Senator Casey, who ran as a pro-life senator 18 years ago, and has voted for legislation that would allow abortions up until the due date and federal funding for them. My position is states' rights. My position is that I'm in favor of the 3 exceptions. My position is that we shouldn't have a federal legislation or a federal mandate or ban. And listen, no, you're not going to make everybody happy on any of these positions. As you know, I'm a father of 6 daughters, and so I've spent time talking about this with them. But that's the position that I think is common ground, and most Pennsylvanians can get their head around it.
This show encourages honest conversations, which isn't easy in today's media environment with big tech deciding who and what gets amplified. Well, there's a news platform that prioritizes free speech and transparency without controlling the narrative. Ground News. Ground News is an app and website that aggregates related articles from around the world, highlighting each source's political bias and corporate influence. Here's an example. Recently, CBS News told their staff not to refer to Jerusalem as being in Israel. And guess who didn't cover this? Left-leaning media. On Ground News, you can see more than 90% of the coverage is coming from right-leaning sources. Ground News has an entire blind spot feed with stories like this that are receiving lopsided coverage. It reveals how media narratives are shaping the conversation, and they're offering our viewers 40% off their Vantage plan, which gives you unlimited access to their website and app. They are independent and supported by subscribers, not corporate interests. Check them out at groundnews.com/Megyn. That's ground, GROUND, news.com/Megyn to take back control of the news you consume. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.